Most people work hard. They wake up early. They hustle. They check things off a list. And yet, they never truly win. They stay in the same place year after year, wondering why their effort doesn't lead to transformation. Then, there's the few. The ones who rise above the noise. The ones who turn effort into progress, progress into power, and power into lasting results. They're not superhuman. They don't have more hours in the day, but they live by a set of rules most people never even see. And that's what makes the difference. Because the truth is, life doesn't reward effort. It rewards alignment with the right principles. You can grind for decades and go nowhere if you're playing by the rules of the crowd. But the moment you adopt the rules that winners live by, everything shifts. Suddenly, the same energy produces different results. The same day feels like it multiplies, and you stop running in circles, you start moving forward. Pause for a second and ask yourself, are you really winning or just moving? That's a hard question, because being busy feels productive. But busyness without direction is just exhaustion disguised as progress. Winners know this, and that's why they don't chase everything. They follow rules that separate them from everyone else. These rules aren't random. They're not motivational slogans you repeat once and forget. They're the invisible codes that shape every choice, every action, every result. They decide whether you keep repeating the same year over and over, or whether you finally break through and live a life that others can only watch from the sidelines. And here's the part most people miss. These rules aren't hidden because they're complicated. They're hidden because they're uncomfortable. They demand a higher standard, a clearer vision, and an unshakable discipline that most people aren't willing to face. That's why the majority stays stuck, while a small minority rises above. So let me be clear. If you keep living like everyone else, you'll keep getting what everyone else gets: fatigue, frustration, excuses, and regrets. But if you're ready to cross the line, to step into the mindset and habits of true winners, you'll discover that success isn't reserved for the lucky few. It's available to anyone who dares to live by these rules. In this video, I'm going to share with you the 7 rules that separate winners from everyone else. Rules that will challenge you, confront you, and, if you apply them, transform you. This is not theory. This is not a list of nice ideas. These are the rules that winners live by when nobody is watching. The private victories that create public success. And here's the promise. If you stay with me until the end, you'll not only know what these rules are, you'll have the clarity to start living them today. You'll see exactly where you've been sabotaging yourself and how to replace confusion with direction, distraction with focus, and hesitation with action. Because once you see the difference, you can't unsee it. You'll start to recognize why some people keep moving in circles while others climb. Why some dream endlessly while others execute relentlessly. And you'll realize that you've always had a choice: to stay like the crowd, or to step out and live by the rules that winners refuse to compromise. So let me ask you, are you willing to face the discomfort that comes with growth? Are you willing to leave behind the patterns that feel safe but keep you small? Because that's the cost of winning. It demands that you stop living by the standards of everyone else and rise to a standard that belongs only to you. Stay until the end. Because once you understand these 7 rules, you won't just know what separates winners from everyone else, you'll know how to join them. The first rule that separates winners from everyone else is simple to understand but rare to practice. Winners live by standards, not moods. Most people let their feelings decide their actions. If they feel motivated, they show up. If they feel tired, they stay in bed. If they feel inspired, they commit. If they feel discouraged, they quit. Their entire life is built on unstable ground because feelings are unpredictable. And when your behavior depends on your mood, your results will always be inconsistent. But winners play by a different code. They don't ask themselves, do I feel like it today? They ask, what does my standard require of me today? That's the difference. A mood is temporary. A standard is permanent. And when you live by standards, you anchor your actions to something that doesn't shift with your emotions. Think about it. Imagine a pilot who only flies when they feel like it. Imagine a surgeon who only operates when they're in the mood. You'd never trust them. And yet, most people treat their own future this way. They wait for the right mood, the perfect day, the burst of inspiration that never lasts. Winners know better. They know that if you only act when you feel good, you'll never build anything great. Living by standards means creating rules for yourself that don't bend to the weather of your emotions. It means saying, "This is who I am, and this is what I do, no matter how I feel." That's why winners wake up early even when they're tired. That's why they train even when they're not motivated. That's why they follow through even when nobody's watching. Their standard doesn't ask for permission from their mood. And here's the truth. Once you live this way, your feelings begin to follow your actions, not the other way around. You stop waiting for motivation and start creating it. Discipline first, emotion second. That's the formula. But let's be clear. This doesn't mean winners are robots. They feel tired. They feel lazy. They feel doubt, just like everyone else. The difference is, they don't let those feelings sit in the driver's seat. They acknowledge the mood, then act according to the standard. And that repeated choice builds trust in themselves, trust that they will show up no matter what. Now ask yourself, what have your moods cost you? How many mornings have you lost because you didn't feel like starting? How many opportunities slipped through your hands because you weren't in the mood to take them? That's the silent price of living by feelings. Winners refuse to pay that price. They know moods are temporary, but consequences are permanent. And they'd rather endure the discomfort of action than the regret of inaction. That's why they win. So what does this look like in practice? It looks like creating non-negotiables in your life. Standards you commit to regardless of how you feel. For example, I work out 4 times a week, no matter what. I don't negotiate with distractions when it's time to focus. I finish what I start. These rules become anchors. And the more you honor them, the more they define who you are. And once you begin to live by standards, something shifts inside you. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries, and you start seeing yourself as someone who is. The identity changes. You no longer ask, "Will I?" You declare, "I do." That's the quiet power that separates winners. They don't live reactively. They live intentionally. But here's the catch. You can't invent standards out of thin air. They have to align with who you want to become. They have to be grounded in a vision bigger than comfort. Otherwise, they'll collapse the moment pressure comes. That's why winners are clear on their direction. They know exactly where they're going, and their standards reflect that vision. And that's where the next rule comes in. Because living by standards means nothing if those standards aren't pointing you toward the future you're building. Winners don't just act consistently. They act consistently in the right direction. The second rule is clarity. Winners know exactly where they're going. Most people drift. They wake up, handle whatever the day throws at them, and hope things will somehow improve. Their focus is on surviving the next 24 hours, not on shaping the next 10 years. They get caught in cycles of busyness, working hard, staying busy, even exhausting themselves. Yet none of it moves them closer to what they truly want. Why? Because they don't actually know what they want. Winners don't live that way. They live with vision. They've taken the time to define exactly what winning looks like for them. They don't just hope for success. They aim at it with precision. They know the difference between activity and progress. And because of that clarity, every decision has direction. Think about it like this. If you put 2 ships out to sea, one with a clear destination mapped and one without, who arrives? The ship with no course may float, may drift, may even look like it's moving, but it will eventually end up lost, stuck, or wrecked. The other ship, guided by a compass and a clear map, arrives where it intends. That's the power of clarity. And here's the truth. Most people aren't failing because they're lazy. They're failing because they're vague. Vague goals produce vague results. Winners understand this. They know that until you decide where you're going, no amount of effort will get you there. But clarity is more than writing down goals. It's about building a vision so strong that it becomes the filter for every choice you make. When you know where you're going, you instantly know what to say yes to and what to say no to. And let's be honest, most people's lives are drowning not in lack of opportunities, but in too many distractions disguised as opportunities. Without clarity, every distraction feels important. With clarity, every distraction is exposed for what it is, a detour. Clarity also creates energy. When you know why you're working, the effort feels lighter. You don't need to drag yourself into discipline. It pulls you forward. Winners don't wake up thinking, "I have to do this." They wake up thinking, "This action is taking me closer to what I've already decided will be mine." That's a different kind of fuel. But notice something important. Clarity doesn't mean perfection. Winners don't wait until every detail is figured out. They don't wait for the perfect plan. They decide the destination, and then they adjust along the way. The vision is fixed. The path can be flexible. That's why they move while others wait. Ask yourself, do you know where you're going, or are you just moving? Do you have a vision that directs your actions, or are you spending your life reacting to whatever happens? Because here's the reality. If you don't define your destination, life will define it for you. And chances are, it won't be the place you wanted to go. This is why clarity separates winners from everyone else. It eliminates hesitation. It cuts through excuses. It sharpens discipline. And it creates the kind of focus that makes progress inevitable. But clarity alone is not enough. You can know exactly where you're going, but if you let the wrong things steal your attention, you'll never arrive. And this is where most people fail. They may set goals. They may even create a vision board. But then they hand their attention to distractions, endless scrolling, toxic environments, wasted conversations. And every distraction pulls them away from the vision they worked so hard to define. Winners know this. That's why they don't just protect their goals, they protect their focus. They treat attention like the currency of success, because it is. The third rule is this: winners protect their attention. Your attention is the most valuable resource you have. Not your money, not your time. Because even with time, if your attention is scattered, you achieve nothing. Attention is what turns hours into progress. And yet, most people give it away for free, to anyone, to anything, to everything. Think about how most days look for the average person. They wake up and the first thing they do is grab their phone. Before their mind has even settled, they've already handed their attention to notifications, to other people's agendas, to the noise of the world. And from that moment on, the day isn't theirs. It belongs to everything pulling at their focus. Winners don't live that way. They guard their attention like a fortress. They know that whoever controls their attention controls their life. That's why they're ruthless about what they allow in. They don't start the day with chaos. They start with clarity. They don't check their phone before they check in with themselves. They create space to direct their focus before the world tries to hijack it. Attention is energy. Where your focus goes, your energy flows. And that means every distraction has a cost. Every time you indulge in meaningless scrolling, you're not just losing minutes. You're draining the mental power that could have been invested in your vision. Every time you let gossip or negativity take root in your mind, you're weakening the foundation of your clarity. And the most dangerous part? It feels harmless. A quick look, a short break, just 5 minutes. But those small leaks add up until your attention is so fragmented that you can't build anything solid. Winners understand this, so they set boundaries that most people would call extreme. They turn off notifications. They design their workspace to minimize distractions. They say no to invitations that don't serve their mission. And while others laugh at their discipline, winners smile, because they know the results will speak louder than explanations. Protecting attention also means protecting your mental environment. It's not just about avoiding social media or noise. It's about being intentional with what you consume, who you listen to, and where you allow your focus to rest. Winners feed their attention with ideas, conversations, and influences that expand their vision, not shrink it. Ask yourself, who or what owns your attention right now? Is it your vision, or is it every random distraction that calls your name? Because the truth is, attention is like money. If you don't tell it where to go, it will disappear without you knowing where it went. But here's the good news. Once you start protecting your attention, even small shifts create massive changes. 30 minutes of deep focus on something meaningful is worth more than 3 hours of half-distracted effort. Protecting attention doesn't just improve results, it multiplies them. Still, let's be clear, protecting attention isn't easy. We live in a world designed to steal it. Every app, every advertisement, every notification is engineered to hook you. That means if you don't actively guard your focus, you'll lose it by default. Winners know this. That's why they don't wait for discipline to magically appear. They create systems that protect their focus automatically. And once you start living this way, something shifts. You realize how much time you've been wasting. You realize how much energy you've been giving away. And you realize that by protecting your attention, you reclaim ownership of your life. Because here's the truth. Your goals don't fail because you're not capable. They fail because you're distracted. And once you remove distraction, progress feels inevitable. The question is, when the noise is gone and the path is clear, will you have the strength to walk it? Most people don't. The moment the noise is gone and the path is clear, they still hesitate. They wait for the perfect moment, the perfect feeling, the surge of motivation that never lasts. And that hesitation costs them everything. Winners live differently. They don't wait to feel ready. They act. They don't need the mood to match the mission. They move forward because their standards demand it, not because their feelings approve of it. And that is what makes their discipline unbreakable. Discipline isn't punishment. It isn't a cage. Real discipline is freedom. It's the ability to trust yourself, to know that when you say you'll do something, you'll follow through. The undisciplined person might feel free in the moment, but they are slaves to distraction, to moods, to inconsistency. The disciplined person may seem restricted, but they walk in freedom because their word holds weight and their actions align with their vision. Think about it. Two people start the same goal on the same day. One is driven by excitement. They feel good. They feel motivated. They take massive action. But a week later, the fire fades, and so do the results. The other begins the same way. Tired, uncertain, tempted to quit, but they show up anyway. Day after day, choice after choice. And after a month, the difference is undeniable. It wasn't talent. It wasn't luck. It was discipline. That's the secret. Discipline is not a gift. It's a muscle. And muscles grow when you challenge them. Every time you act in spite of fatigue, every time you keep a promise you'd rather break, you're training the muscle of self-mastery. At first, it's heavy. At first, it hurts. But over time, the weight that once crushed you becomes effortless. This is why winners don't run from resistance. They embrace it. They know resistance is the sign that growth is happening. They welcome the hard mornings, the distractions they have to fight through, the temptations they have to deny. Because every battle they win in private becomes strength they can carry into every other part of life. But here's the mistake most people make. They try to change everything at once. They believe discipline means overhauling their entire life in a single leap. And then, when they inevitably stumble, they quit. Winners know better. They understand that unbreakable discipline is built in the small, ordinary choices repeated daily. Getting up when the alarm rings. Finishing what they start. Saying no when comfort whispers louder than commitment. Each act alone seems small, insignificant, but together, they form a foundation that can't be shaken. And this is where the deeper power of discipline appears. It shapes identity. Without identity, discipline feels like punishment. With identity, discipline feels like power. When you see yourself as someone who keeps their word, following through isn't forced, it's natural. It's not a struggle to get up early when it matches who you believe you are. It's not a burden to stay focused when you carry the identity of someone who values their time. That's why winners don't just practice discipline as behavior. They weave it into identity. It's not what they do, it's who they are. And that shift changes everything. Because when discipline is identity, failure doesn't define you. Everyone stumbles. Everyone misses a day, slips into distraction, falls short. But winners don't let failure turn into surrender. They don't let one mistake become the story of who they are. They reset. They return. They rise again. That's why their discipline becomes unbreakable. Not because they never fall, but because they never stay down. But here's the challenge. Discipline on its own can still feel heavy. To make it last, it must be tied to something deeper. That deeper foundation is identity. Winners don't just stack habits one on top of another. They shape the kind of person they believe themselves to be. And that single shift changes everything. Most people try to improve their life by changing isolated behaviors. They want to exercise more, wake up earlier, work harder. And sometimes they succeed for a week, maybe a month. But eventually, the old pattern comes back. Why? Because they never changed the root. They were still carrying the same identity, the same self-image, the same story about who they are. Habits are fragile when they're not connected to identity. If you see yourself as someone who tries to be disciplined, your brain always leaves the back door open for failure. You'll start, you'll stop, you'll repeat the cycle. But if you see yourself as someone who is disciplined, the habit stops being negotiable. It's no longer an experiment. It's part of who you are. This is why winners win. They don't say, "I want to run." They say, "I am a runner." They don't say, "I'm trying to eat clean." They say, "I am the kind of person who respects my body." They don't say, "I'll try to focus." They say, "I am someone who protects my attention." Identity transforms effort into inevitability. Think about it. When was the last time you debated brushing your teeth? You don't, because it's part of your identity. That's the power of shifting self-image. What feels impossible at first becomes effortless once it's who you are. And here's the hidden key. Every action is a vote for identity. Every time you rise when you don't feel like it, you're casting a vote for the kind of person who honors their word. Every time you keep a promise, you're reinforcing, "I am someone who can be trusted." And when those votes pile up, the identity becomes unshakable. But it works the other way too. Every time you delay, every time you choose comfort over commitment, you're casting votes for the version of yourself that loses trust. That's why the stakes are so high. Not because of the single choice in front of you, but because of the story that choice reinforces. This is why winners are relentless about aligning their actions with their vision of identity. They know habits matter, but identity lasts longer. Habits can break under pressure. Identity endures under fire. So let me ask you, what identity are you building right now? Every day you're rehearsing something. Are you rehearsing being someone who avoids discomfort or someone who steps into it? Are you reinforcing the story that you quit when it's hard or the story that you rise no matter what? The crowd doesn't think about identity. They're too busy chasing the next hack, the next motivational video, the next shortcut. Winners don't chase shortcuts. They build a self-image so aligned with their future that every action naturally flows from it. And here's the paradox. Once your identity shifts, discipline doesn't feel like discipline anymore. It doesn't feel like effort. It feels like alignment. You don't have to drag yourself forward. You're simply living as who you already believe you are. That's the real separation between winners and everyone else. Not talent, not luck, but the quiet, daily rehearsal of identity until it becomes reality. And once you see this clearly, you understand something powerful. Failure doesn't define you, but how you define yourself determines whether you fail or rise. No matter how strong your identity becomes, life will test it. And here's where the separation between winners and everyone else grows even wider. How they respond to failure. Most people treat failure like a dead end. They hit a wall and assume it means they're not good enough, not capable, not cut out for it. They feel the sting of a mistake and let it become a story about who they are. One setback turns into surrender. One slip turns into quitting. And before long, they're back where they started. Only this time with less belief in themselves. Winners see failure differently. They don't deny it. They don't pretend it feels good, but they refuse to let it be the end of the story. To them, failure is feedback. It's data. It's proof of where they need to adjust, refine, grow. And because of that mindset, every setback becomes fuel. Instead of weakening their identity, it strengthens it. Think about a child learning to walk. They fall hundreds of times. If failure meant stop, none of us would ever take a single step. But to a child, falling is part of the process. They stumble, they adjust, and eventually, walking becomes second nature. Winners never lose that mindset. They treat failure as training. This doesn't mean they like failing. It means they've decided that failure is useful. Every missed shot teaches them how to aim better. Every lost deal teaches them how to communicate stronger. Every rejection teaches them how to refine their approach. Where others see evidence to quit, winners see an invitation to adapt. And here's the truth. If you avoid failure, you avoid growth. The only way to never fail is to never try. And the cost of avoiding failure is a lifetime of staying small. Winners would rather fail forward than stay stuck in safety. That's why, while most people hide from risk, winners embrace it, because they know the pain of regret is heavier than the sting of a stumble. But notice something deeper. Failure doesn't just test your actions. It tests your identity. When you stumble, do you say, "I failed," or do you say, "I'm a failure"? The crowd chooses the second, and their story dies there. Winners choose the first, and their story grows stronger. They separate the event from their essence. They remind themselves, "I failed, but that doesn't define me. I rise." And that rising is what multiplies their progress. Because while most people spend weeks, or even years, recovering from a single failure, winners recover in moments. They don't let failure break momentum. They let it build resilience. And that resilience compounds. Over time, they become unstoppable, not because they never fall, but because falling no longer frightens them. Ask yourself, how many times have you let a single mistake stop you? How many times have you given up because the pain of failing felt final? What if, instead, you decided to see it as fuel? What if every mistake became a stepping stone, not a stumbling block? This is how winners think. And it's not just mindset, it's practice. They build systems to reflect, learn, and adjust after every stumble. They ask, "What does this teach me?" instead of "Why me?" That single question changes the trajectory of their entire journey. And here's the paradox. The more you embrace failure, the less it controls you. The more you see it as feedback, the less it can break you. And eventually, failure becomes not something you fear, but something you expect, because you know it's proof that you're stretching, growing, moving forward. That's why winners turn failure into fuel, because they understand that progress isn't built in a straight line, it's forged in the fire of setbacks. Every scar becomes a story of strength. Every loss becomes a lesson that compounds into wisdom. But here's the key. Winners don't just survive failure, they use it. And that use becomes the difference between a life of hesitation and a life of resilience. And once you grasp this truth, you see the bigger pattern. Success doesn't to avoid mistakes. It belongs to those who can endure them, learn from them, and keep moving. Because in the end, it's not about how many times you fall. It's about how many times you rise, and what you carry with you each time you do. Failure. For most people, it's the end of the road. They stumble once and assume it means they're not good enough. They treat setbacks as proof that they should quit, and every mistake becomes another reason to play small. Winners see failure differently. They know it isn't a verdict, it's feedback. Every missed shot, every wrong turn, every rejection is simply information. It doesn't mean stop. It means learn. That's why setbacks don't weaken them, they sharpen them. Think about it. A child learning to walk falls hundreds of times. But nobody looks at a child and says, "Walking isn't for you." We understand that falling is part of learning. Winners carry that same mindset into every area of life. To them, falling is training. But here's the critical difference. Most people let failure define their identity. They say, "I failed, therefore I am a failure." Winners separate the event from the essence. They say, "I failed, but that doesn't change who I am." That single shift keeps them moving while everyone else stops. This is why winners become unstoppable over time. Not because they avoid mistakes, but because they turn mistakes into momentum. Every failure fuels resilience. Every scar tells them they're stronger than before. Every setback becomes another layer of experience that compounds into wisdom. Ask yourself, how many times have you let one mistake erase months of progress? How many times have you quit because the pain of failing felt permanent? Winners don't quit. They extract the lesson, adjust the approach, and rise again. And here's the paradox. The more you fail, the less power failure has over you. It stops being something you fear and becomes something you expect, and even welcome, because it means you're growing. That's why this rule matters. Winners turn failures into fuel. They refuse to let setbacks break them. and instead, they use every stumble as proof that they're still moving forward. But there's one more rule that ties everything together. Because while it's powerful to turn failures into fuel, winners also understand that true success comes from playing a different kind of game. One that most people never have the patience to play. Most people want results fast. They want shortcuts, hacks, and overnight success. If it doesn't happen in a week, they quit. If they don't see instant payoff, they assume it doesn't work. And that's why they stay stuck. Because the best things in life don't happen instantly. Winners know this. They play the long game. They understand that real transformation takes time, consistency, and patience. They're not fooled by quick wins or obsessed with immediate gratification. They're building something that lasts. While everyone else is chasing the next easy fix, winners are planting seeds, watering them daily, and trusting that growth will come in its season. Think about compounding interest. At first, it looks like nothing is happening. The growth is invisible. But stay consistent long enough, and suddenly the curve explodes. That's life. Most people never experience compounding because they quit before the results show up. Winners stay long enough to reap the rewards. This mindset changes everything. When you're playing the short game, every obstacle feels like disaster. A setback feels final. But when you're playing the long game, a setback is just a moment, a chapter, not the whole story. You don't panic when you stumble. You adjust and continue. That's why winners remain steady when everyone else burns out. Patience isn't passive. It's active commitment to a bigger vision. Winners keep showing up, not because every day feels amazing, but because they know every day matters. They're willing to invest years into mastering their craft, building their health, growing their relationships. They think in decades, not days. And here's the hidden advantage. Playing the long game eliminates competition. Most people quit after the first challenge. More quit after the first year. Almost nobody stays long enough to see exponential results. Winners win not only because they're good, but because they endure. They outlast everyone else. Ask yourself, where have you been expecting results too quickly? Where have you been giving up because the payoff wasn't immediate? Imagine what could happen if, instead of quitting, you committed fully for the long run. Because here's the truth. The long game rewards those who can delay gratification. The crowd chooses comfort now and regret later. Winners choose discipline now and freedom later. And the freedom they gain is the kind most people will never taste. That's why this final rule is so powerful. Winners play the long game. They understand that success isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. It's not about how fast you start, but how long you endure. And when you step back, you can see how this rule connects them all. Living by standards, not moods. Having clarity of direction. Protecting attention. Practicing discipline. Building identity. Turning failure into fuel. All of these only work when you commit to the long game. The question is, will you? Will you keep chasing shortcuts, or will you choose to build a life that compounds into something extraordinary? Because in the end, that's what separates winners from everyone else. They're not faster. They're not luckier. They're not even always smarter. They're simply willing to stay in the game long after everyone else has walked away. And that's why they win. So now you know the 7 rules. The rules that separate winners from everyone else. The only question left is, will you just hear them, or will you live them?